going to be structuring tonight's event is kind of to start with reduce, then reuse, and then recycle. The three R's of sustainability are reduce, reuse, and recycle, and you should always try and do your best to follow them in that order. So first, talking about reduce, reducing the amount that we buy, reducing the amount that we waste, and reducing the amount of things that we buy that might be harmful for the planet. The first topic we're going to go into is meal planning. This is a great way to make sure that you are not buying more than you need. I started doing this personally about 6 months ago, and I save probably like $50 to $100 every single time I go to the grocery store just because I have a plan. I have an exact list of things that I want to do, and I'm able to plan my meals for the entire week. Something that I have found to be very effective and a way that I just waste pretty much no food at all whatsoever is I will go to the grocery store early on Sunday morning with a plan for all my meals for the week. And then I will just batch make pretty much all of them. All on Sunday afternoon while I was watching football. No longer watching football, unfortunately. But I would just make myself like 7 burritos, stick them in the freezer, and then I can just heat them up for lunch. That way, you know that none of the produce or meat that you're using in those burritos is going to go bad before you have a chance to make it. You're actually motivated to eat the food because you don't have to be cooking it in the middle of the day. And it's already in the freezer, so there's just no way it can really go bad. That's just one example of a way to kind of set yourself up for success. And I think a lot of the things we talk about are general tips and guides that work for us, but it's also very important to be listening to yourself, understanding what's going to work for you, and kind of following it that way. And like I mentioned on the topic of meal planning and reducing what we eat, unfortunately, for those meat lovers out there, there is really no way around the fact that eating meat and the dairy industry do have a large, relatively negative environmental impact on our planet. So one thing that you could consider is going Meatless Monday. That's a campaign that's been pretty popular for a while, trying to move people away from relying on meat for all their meals and get them into some more vegetarian and plant-based options. If you are someone who's looking to slowly wean yourself off of meat or just introduce more plant-based eating into your lifestyle, I would highly recommend doing something like this, or even just saying, alrighty, I'm not going to have any meat for lunches anymore. Personally speaking, I'm someone who is aiming to be vegetarian by the start of the summer. So right now I'm not eating any meat for breakfast or for lunches, and I'm trying to only do it for a couple of dinners every week, having no red meat, just chicken. But it's a process, you know, we are grown up and kind of socialized to enjoy eating these things. And it's a large part of our culture for a lot of people. And making these stark changes from saying you're eating meat 7 days a week to saying, okay, I'm going to be a vegan now. It's very hard to do that just in a day. You're not going to know how to cook the food. You're not going to know if you actually enjoy eating the food. So your brain is a muscle, and you kind of have to train your brain to appreciate different types of food. But I can just tell you one thing from personal experience. Doing this, I feel so much healthier. And just like, it just feels very, very fresh to be eating way more veggies than I was before. So I would highly, highly recommend that. I'm also going to pass it over to Nan now to talk a little bit about grocery and meal delivery services, because that's kind of a part of meal planning that is becoming more increasingly popular in our society, but might have some environmental drawbacks and some benefits.
Yeah, actually, for this one, I was really interested if people had things in the chat. I've kind of wondered about this. We tried one of these services at one point, and it didn't seem like, I don't know if it was the Misfits or one of the others. It didn't seem like the things were, the fruits and vegetables were actually misfits. So I don't really know what's going on with that industry. I would be very interested if people had some either good or bad experiences with the different companies. I think we also talked to Kenny about the sort of the highly individualized packaging that you get with some of these other ones that you mention here. Yeah, so what I was speaking about particularly, by the way, was more the misfit market kind of thing, where you get the things that presumably are not going to be sold and are going to go right to the landfill, and now you can sign up to have those delivered to you. This other topic, I think, Kenny, you had an experience with one of these companies, didn't you?
Yeah, I could say personally speaking from HelloFresh, it is very, very convenient to have stuff delivered right to your door, but it honestly kind of shocked me how much packaging is in a lot of these things. Every single thing is individually wrapped. You're getting tiny little sauce packets, and it is very convenient. And honestly, with the price of groceries, it is like, it's not an outrageously expensive option compared to just buying groceries by yourself. It is a little bit more expensive. But just like, I would get this massive box that only had 3 meals in it. It would be a bunch of like a giant ice pack that I had, like, you got to figure out what to do with that, if that can even be recycled Probably not. A giant box and all these individually wrapped things. So if you are trying to just reduce the amount of packaging in your food, I would probably steer clear of these services. But again, like Nan mentioned at the beginning, it's really just a question of trade-offs. If you are a single mother with 3 kids and you don't have time to do a ton of grocery shopping, then this might be the only option for you, and that's okay. You shouldn't necessarily feel bad about it.
Somebody did mention in the chat a point I wanted to bring up about CSAs that deliver. I know of a couple up in our area. I'm not sure where everybody's from, but that is a really good choice because they do use a lot of the local farmers. It's kind of like having the cherry pick sample from the farmer's market brought to you. So you get it seasonal and local.
Okay. Yeah, grocery shopping. Okay. Yeah, so here's a couple things we want to think about with this. Obviously, we've been talking about it already, but I think many of us think about the packaging and material, and I've relied on Michael's expertise these years and heard him speak on these talks before that yeah, nothing would be best. That's great. And then cardboard and glass are definitely preferable over plastic. Kenny just this afternoon had a post of an apple wrapped in plastic and on your Instagram post, and like, why? You said it has a peel, and then somebody else said, yeah, there was a banana wrapped in plastic. So let's not wrap any more things in plastic than we absolutely have to. And definitely, I think if we can choose these other packaging materials, and the cardboard, I do like to either reuse in the yard, or some kinds of cardboard I put in my compost pile. Now, when we get to the emissions from production versus transportation, from what I've learned, the production emissions are much higher than the transportation emissions. And so really, the food miles is not high on the list of what you need to be thinking about. There are many, many reasons to buy local, and we will talk about some of those, and supporting your community, and knowing what your local farmers are doing, and all of that. That's all great, but really from a purely impact on the planet, it's not always best to buy local. If there's something that can be more sustainably raised in a different part of the world, you're better off buying, I heard somebody say, you're better off buying an apple from New Zealand if they can grow it perhaps, without pesticides, in that place, versus buying it somewhere else where we have to use more inputs. So that's the kind of thing you want to think about, the whole life cycle analysis. And the food miles I've read have, one person claimed only 2% of our carbon footprint from food is from food miles. Somebody else said 5%. It's quite low. And I do have some links that I've passed on that we'll have available if you want to follow up on that information. Of course, it's great to eat in season when we can. And yeah. Oh, reusable. Sorry, one more thing. Speaking of the glass, I'm finding more and more places where you can take a jar at the Lovettsville Co-op. You can you can put peanut butter in a glass jar, and I think that's great. I hate those little plastic peanut butter containers, and you can do this with many, many more foods now. Buy in bulk, use glass, fill it up, then you can reuse it.
I unmuted to say buy in bulk, but you just hit it, so I'm
Oh,
listening
okay.
back to us now. Because that's a big one for saving money and for controlling waste all at the same time.
Thank you. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay, and then we're going to talk about some of these labels that you might see. And actually, the one that I wanted to really focus on was something I saw a great presentation on recently, which was the bird-friendly Smithsonian coffee, which really does make a difference. And I have a link to this presentation that the Smithsonian people gave on this. And really, just buying something with another kind of label that alludes to some sort of shade is really not doing the trick. They are really getting away from the plantation agriculture out in the sun of the coffee, and growing it where it's needs to be grown, which it is in a shady environment, and this is good for the birds and all of the other wildlife, and is just going to require fewer inputs, and then preserves the forests in those countries. So I think like having your coffee locally ground and roasted, that's not really a thing you would do for lowering your impact. You might like supporting those local businesses, but really to make a difference, you need to look for this label, which you can go online and find what the bird-friendly Smithsonian coffees are. And I don't normally use any of the fair trade. Yeah, I do look into the fair trade some. I think that's an important thing. But I don't go with these other labels so much. But Michael, I think you have some thoughts about these labels.
Yeah, I have what's sure to be a very popular opinion on these. Uh, while I do believe in voting with your dollars and shopping with your values and ethics, I do believe in those things. I do believe they're important. I don't believe these labels are important. Uh, they were well intentioned, but for the most part, you purchase your way into it, and you're self-reporting and self-auditing. So the proof that it's organic or ethical is you're believing somebody that has enough money to pay for it. If you truly are concerned about these issues, uh, sure, maybe purchase that over a different thing. But the number one way is to buy local. If you can go to that farm, then you can see if it's organic, regardless of whether they're paying for the certification. You can see if they're using, family labor, unpaid labor, or if they're being an equitable partner in their community. Now, this goes for plants, animal agriculture, the works. Uh, if you find you cannot visit a place, that should be a red flag that perhaps you don't want to purchase that thing. And maybe you have one of these high density farms near you, and see if you can visit them, and that might tell you whether it's worth buying the product or not.
Moving on from grocery shopping, we're going to talk about how to store all that stuff. So one thing to keep in mind is that the way that food is stored in stores and the way it's packaged is not necessarily the way that it's actually going to stay fresh for the longest. One example for that is herbs. A lot of people have to buy those in those like tiny little clamshell plastic containers. But that is not actually the way to get them to last the longest. If you just stick most of them in a glass of water and then just put it either on the side of the fridge or like even on a windowsill, it's going to last a lot longer. Some things can even regrow if you do that, like lettuce and green onions, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Another thing to be considering is the expiration dates. I'm not going to go very far into this for risk of litigation. Again, I said I was not an expert at the beginning at all. But by and large, you don't need to listen to the expiration dates 100% of the time. If it's dairy or meat, I would definitely listen to the expiration dates. But if it's some other stuff, you can definitely get away with waiting a couple weeks, even longer. And even some dairy, like if it's cheese and you see mold on it, and it's like a big ball of cheese and there's just mold on this one little side, cut off that little section, cut off a little bit around it to make sure all that bad stuff is gone. But then you can still eat the rest of the cheese. If it's something like berries and you notice a couple of the berries are actually molded, I would still go ahead and toss all of those. So, be smart about what you're eating and trust your intuition a lot of the time. Like if it looks like it would be fine to eat, a lot of the time it is probably fine to eat. Again, not with meat. And again, don't sue us because these are all just suggestions. I am by no means telling you this is 100% facts. In terms of storing, oh yeah, go for it, Mike.
I'll jump in there, yeah. Two things. The first, most of it is for the taste value of what the manufacturer wants you to taste out of the product. And then the second, to piggyback on your meats, definitely follow those. Whereas with cheese, you can see the mold. A lot of the meat packaging, especially the styrofoam with the looks like saran wrap on it, those are atmospherically controlled on the inside. And the gases that are put into it are so that if meat begins to spoil, it doesn't show the signs of spoil. And it's only spoiled enough that if you cook it all the way, you'll be fine. But the corporations have found a way to sell you spoiled meat, regardless of the packaging label.
Oh, and Kenny, the last thing here, I recently was able to finally make this change. Throw some old containers in the back of your car and keep them there. I'm so tired of the styrofoam carry-out containers, but you don't want to be throwing out your food, right? If you don't finish your real meal at a restaurant. But so I like to, I'm sure a lot of people are doing that, carrying around containers.
I actually just did at a restaurant this past like 2 weeks ago, and the person looked at me like I was crazy, and then I looked at them like they were crazy for using styrofoam, and it worked out great. In other terms of food storage, another thing that I actually learned recently was the just amazing invention of the crisper drawers. I don't know if I just wasn't taught this as a child, but those like drawers that you pull out in your fridge, then you control the humidity, those are wonders for food storage. Pay attention to those. The general rule of thumb is to put things that tend to rot in a drawer with a low humidity setting. So those are things like fruit and veggies that emit gases, which cause them to rot. And then the opposite would be true for things like leafy greens. You want to put those in a high humidity area. So just pay attention to those crisper drawers and utilize them when you can, because they do make a difference. I can speak to that personally. Also, be sure to be utilizing your freezer. This is honestly one of the most underrated and untalked about sustainable tools every single one of us has in our kitchen, pretty much. If your food is about to go bad, just pay attention to those expiration dates and toss it in the freezer. Like if your meat's going to go expire tomorrow and you know that you're not going to have time to cook tomorrow, toss that in the freezer and use it later. Don't let food go bad just because you're not paying attention. I even prep some vegetables in the freezer sometimes. If I know I'm not going to feel like cutting up an onion later, I'll just spend 20 minutes cutting up a bunch of them, stick them in a reusable bag, pop them in the freezer, and then I can just toss them into whatever I'm cooking. Just really try and make use of that freezer to preserve your food, because at the end of the day, when you throw food away, you're just throwing your own money away. That's what I like to think about a lot of the time.
Hey, Kenny, one quick comment from the chat is that there are produce extenders available that can really, they are made out of plastic, unfortunately, but they can really help produce last longer.
I fully believe that. And even if you don't want to buy those things, I don't exactly know what a produce extender is, but there are ways to just store the produce that you get to really maximize its shelf life. Like the picture you see on the screen, storing celery and carrots fully submerged in water, that is able to keep them crisp for longer. I also had great success storing my strawberries for up to like 2 weeks to keep them fresh. I just came home, washed them in a bath of water, apple cider vinegar, and baking soda, I believe. Gave them a rinse, dried them off, and then just stuck them in a glass Tupperware container with a towel on the bottom and the top to absorb any of that excess moisture. So a little bit of like a berry burrito. And then I went out of town and literally drove cross country from Oregon back to Virginia, and those strawberries still tasted absolutely delicious. So I can 100% recommend giving that a try.
One more question, real quick. When you freeze produce, do you freeze it in a plastic or glass typically?
I typically just use, I have like they're reusable plastic bags. I think I forget what the name of them is. But I bought them like months ago in just a bunch of different sizes, and I use them all in there. I use them for my veggies, for veggie scraps that I save to make vegetable broth and stuff like that. I'd highly recommend reusable plastic bags. I know it's technically plastic that you have to buy, but it just reduces the amount of single-use plastics that you have to use. So if you're able to keep them for a long time, it does help.
It depends on what I'm freezing to. If I'm freezing something that is going to be going into like worm food, compost tea, vinegar, broth, something of that nature, I have mesh cloth bags, because it doesn't matter if they get a little freezer burned or if they get extra crystals on them.
Alrighty, we're going to move on to gardening.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to talk very briefly about this. I think the best thing about the gardening is this is the no packaging way to get food into your household. And gardening's not for everybody. It really depends on how much time you have. I don't know that you can always save money by gardening. It depends on it probably depends on if you know what you're doing and so forth, but definitely there's no food miles and there's no packaging, and that in itself is just a real reason to garden. But you want to consider the how much input you're using to put into the garden. You know, we don't want to be gardening with lots of inputs. We want to be thinking about what's coming into our environment and what we're having leave our environment and go into a landfill. So we want to think about how much water we're using and how many, hopefully at home we can do organic gardening and we're not really using any industrial chemicals on it. So just doing that in a low impact way is definitely to be desired too. Yeah, okay, so we can go to, oh yeah, and there's a couple of things I wanted to say about gardening. Speaking of impacts, one thing I do is think about what really wants to grow here. For example, I find that the sort of the peepo pumpkin, they call it, the Halloween or jack-o'-lantern sort of pumpkin, the nice orange round one. They really don't grow very well here. And I've researched this quite a bit, and there's different species of pumpkins, and something like the butternut squash grows here really well. This is we are in Northern Virginia. It's a humid southeast climate, and we have a lot of mildew and a lot of bugs, and something like butternut squash is very little affected and you just don't need any chemicals for it. I love cucumbers and I love to grow cucumbers. I only get about 2 weeks of cucumbers before the vine starts to wilt from the various, I don't even know which fungi or bugs or whatever it is that gets into them. But these are great little things. These are called cucamelons or mouse melons. And actually we sell them at the native plant nursery where I work, Watermark Woods. But also you can buy little seed packs of them. And I'm seeing more and more of these little seed packs. So these are tiny little, they're like little mini watermelons. They're kind of distantly related to cucumbers. I think they're a great choice instead of our domesticated cucumber. They're just really quick and easy and require no inputs to have them grow as vines that go all over the place. And then I have persimmons here as an example of, native fruits that like to grow here. And again, don't need any sprays at all. And speaking of that kind of thing, the Eurasian wine grape is not actually adapted to our climate either here in Northern Virginia or in many places in the United States, for example. So I like to choose wine from hybrid grapes. Hybrid grapes are ones that are the Eurasian wine grape, which is the crop, crossed, hybridized with a native grape from North America. And there's a lot of these, and some of them are old heritage vines, and some of them are newer cultivars they're coming up with. I think this is really the way forward. This is the way to not have your the wine you're drinking come from grapes that are sprayed up to maybe every week, multiple times a season, because again, if there's a lot of humidity, it's really not a great place to grow a wine grape that's from Eurasia. So these are some of the local ones that in this area of the country, but you might want to look into what hybrid grapes are available or what wineries are serving wine from hybrid grapes in where you live. And beyond that, by the way, down here in the corner, I have the Norton, which is sort of Virginia's grape that's been around for quite some time. And so that's one of the things you can look for. They're really starting to make wine from other fruits instead. And there's actually a farm called Artemisia Farm in Virginia where they are making wine from persimmons and pawpaws and other fruits. And so maybe we kind of need to think a little bit beyond the wine grape and just think about that as a choice you could make to lessen the amount of chemical sprays that are going out into the environment.
As someone who ruined red wine for myself in college, I'm very excited for the thought of a different type of wine. I can just say that,
Okay.
embarrass myself a little bit there.
Go with the pawpaw, anything pawpaw, whether it's fresh jelly, wine, fermented, any way you could get it. I highly recommend those.
Oh, and so just in general, I heard this on a podcast and I really liked it. He said, what's best for you is typically best for the planet. You don't find that with everything, but I really love that this applies to our eating. And for example, I think Kenny's going to talk about beans a little bit. Things that are high fiber, like beans, they're high fiber for you. They're healthy. They're much lower impact than our meats. on the environment. Vegetables we know are good for us. We know this fiber is good for our gut microbiome, but these are also the things that are better for the planet when we're eating lower on the food chain by eating a more plant-forward diet. These are just some nasturtiums thrown on the top. I'm sure many of you grow nasturtiums in your garden, and it's a fun way to add a little bit of kick bite to your salad, and also some pretty color. And the other thing on this podcast about that said this, he was saying, you know, the things to do if you really want to make an impact. Number one is don't waste. Number two is choose your protein wisely. And he was really making the point that the protein that you choose has a much, much bigger impact than, for example, something like food miles. It really matters what you're choosing for your protein. And again, there's a whole scale of things that are going to be appropriate for different people and what their body types need, but we do want to sort of think about a little bit more of a plant forward kind of diet. And yeah, I think that's it.
Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience as someone who has done plant-based eating for a little bit of time?
Sure. I found it pretty easy, but I was going from a like a locavore. For all those I haven't met yet, I grew up on a farm, so we were pretty much plant forward the majority of it anyway. It wasn't in the United States until about the late 40s, early 50s, before meat became more than a 3-time-a-week dish. We've really gone from 3 times a week to 7 to 14 times, and that's it's a lot more than what we had historically done. Growing up on the farm, we did consume meat, but we butchered our own and we did our own food preservation for it. And I still recommend those methods. But if you're looking to eliminate the meat or reduce it, plants are where to go. Yeah, I'm not as much of a bean person as probably Kenny's going to describe to us. I got my favorites, but oil and soy, of course. But to get started, I just carbohydrates. I love carbohydrates, man. Breads, potatoes, pastas. I'm not a health food person, so please consult your doctor before you go with Mike's. You know, my 4 food groups are salt, fat, grease, and carbohydrates. So not the healthy way, but it can be. And you know, when I'm plan ahead and I plan my meals, I can be healthier. But I like my carbs. And that's really how I just kind of replaced it, one meal at a time. Then we went vegetarian, and then, gosh, I guess it's been a little over 2 decades ago, we went vegan. At that time, there weren't a lot of alternatives you could just buy straight at the store. We had to hand make, home make everything. And I stand by whether vegan, vegetarian, omnivore, pescatarian, whatever, the less production value that goes into your food, the better. The fewer hands, the fewer processing before it reaches your plate, the better.
I think that's a really great point. And just like there isn't necessarily one place to get started. It's kind of taking the approach of whatever works for you. For someone like Mike, that might mean eating a lot of carbohydrates. For somebody else, that might mean eating a whole bunch of candy and sugar, in which case you might not want to be considering these changes. It's really all about figuring out what works best for you, and then kind of trying to just roll with that for as long as you can and make these changes sustainably. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it'd be very hard for someone to go from eating meat 7 times a week to being completely vegan. You will most likely burn out from that in a couple weeks and then go right back to your habit and feel pretty discouraged because you might feel like you failed at something. When in reality, these gradual steps, even if you're not changing everything all at once, that still makes a difference, and it's creating a sustainable change that you'll be able to maintain for your life to come. And more on these beans. So this is actually something that Nan introduced me to just a couple of weeks ago. But this Beans is How movement is really encouraging people to double our bean intake by 2030. So that's a very, very ambitious goal. But as Mike and Nan both mentioned, beans are just a great, great source of protein, great source of fiber, and one that has much less environmental impact when compared to meat, especially beef. I was doing a little research before tonight, and producing 1 pound of beef can require up to 100 times more greenhouse gases than producing 1 pound of peas or beans. So that's really something to consider. Like if you are someone who eats meat all the time, and you really are focused on getting your protein, you are able to get it other ways. I'll be completely honest, it might be harder for you if you don't like the taste as much. I know a lot of people don't like the texture of beans necessarily. Try out different ones. Different beans taste kind of different. I'm not huge onto black beans, but I personally am obsessed with chickpeas, so I can just eat those all day long. So experiment with different things, find what works for you, and really just stick with that. And where to find recipes? The internet. It is your best friend. At least my personal Instagram feed is a whole bunch of recipes, and that's probably because I like and engage with them a lot. But honestly, the ability to find recipes easily on social media is what has allowed me to transition into more plant-based eating. It has never been easier to find recipes that are super accessible and super easy. So just try and do a little bit of research before you go to the grocery store, plan out those meals, and really lessen your impact and save yourself some money.
I'm sorry to bring us on a tangent because I know we're tight with time. Did you try the chickpea of the sea recipe I gave you last time we met?
I have not tried it yet, but it is like it's actually on the list for this week. So it will be done. I will report back maybe in the email follow-up I send you guys. I can just let you know how it was. Alrighty. Well, we're taking our time here, so we're going to speed it up a little bit, and we are on to our next topic, reuse. Alrighty, so we are going to fly through this. Mike, do you want to talk food scraps just for a little bit?
Yes, I will try to be briefer.
You can be longer on this one if you want to, because this is a big topic.
Okay. So at the very beginning, we talked about having a plan, and that's the first bullet here. When you've planned out your meals, plan out your food waste as well. Yes, you can compost things. If you're limited on space, you can do vermicomposting indoors. You can put vegetable scraps in the freezer till you build up enough, make a veggie broth. I believe, Kenny, you had a video on that for one of them. If you keep your fruits and fruit scraps separate from your veggie scraps, same thing in the freezer until you've got enough of them, you can turn that into a vinegar. Now most people, and probably most places you'll find on the internet, they like to tell you to only use one kind of fruit, so your vinegar has a cohesive flavor. I'm not that person. If I was making wine, yeah, sure, I only want to put apples in it to make an apple cider style. If I'm fermenting it for vinegar, it doesn't matter to me if it's strawberries, apples, persimmons, a little bit of everything in there. But no, that's fine. It's going to taste like vinegar. Maybe a little on the sweeter side, but take my advice with a grain of salt. Maybe try fermenting a couple smaller portions and having some vinegar of different flavors. Then, go crazy. Mix them all together and see how that is. If you're not into fermentation, probably not the best place to start. I would recommend pickles for a good, safe, easy way to start. And then regrowing from scraps. So if you find on your plan that you've got lettuce on your shopping list every week or twice a month, or onions, celery, tomatoes, even beans, or any kind of greens, if there's something that's just reoccurring on your list, regrow from the scraps, like potatoes. That last potato in the bag that starts to put out his little like Cthulhu tentacles out there, that grows new potatoes. You can do it inside on the windowsill in a 5-gallon bucket. You can do it outside if you have outside space in a 5-gallon bucket, or the ground if you have access to ground. For greens, well, let me start with an easier one. It's easier to visualize. For an onion, right? You know how you're cutting your onion, and the first thing you cut off is that little hairy, rooty bit at the end because you're not going to eat that. That's the part of the onion that grows back. If you soak that, it'll help sprout the roots a little bit. Then you plant it into the ground. If you soak it for about 2 days, so it gets really good and waterlogged, you can directly sow that little sliver. Well, I'll say little sliver, about 3/4 of an inch is what you want. And that'll regrow an onion. You'll see the little green stalk come out of the top and get an onion bulb out of it. Likewise with celery, lettuce, and your greens, that bit at the end that you don't eat, if you keep about 2.5, 3 inches of it, that's what you're going to put in water to help resprout and regrow, and then have those things instead of buying it every single week. Now, if you don't have windowsill space, you don't have porch space, you just live in a basement, you're going to probably want to go with vermicomposting. There are electronic composters. I don't have any personal experience with them, so I can't really tell you. in the abstract, I'm not a fan of them. It just seems strange to be using electricity for biological control that would happen naturally. It seems like it's more of a wash than a benefit, but maybe that's just me. Vermicomposting, on the other hand, having yourself a worm bin, lots of fun. If you've always wanted to have like 10,000 pets in your house, but you didn't have the space, this is. I think I touched on tomato. Tomatoes can regrow easily. They have their seeds. So when you're cutting your slices of tomato, the slice with the seeds, you can direct sow that to grow. It's a little bit harder. I have zero ability with tomatoes whatsoever. I'm abysmal with them. My wife, on the other hand, is like Johnny Appleseed with tomatoes. And then I'm that way with green beans, and she kills them. So I have a belief that everybody has an attunement to certain plants and an avoidance of others. So yeah, my takeaway for that is try it. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's not. All of these things that we're going over tonight is not something that every person has to do every minute of every day of their life, but it is good life skills to have. So try it. Maybe it doesn't work today, and in 10 years' time, you have less money and more time. Then it works out well for you. Or vice versa. Maybe it's something that works well now, but in the future, you have more money and less time, so you don't do that anymore. That's okay. But trying different things is what's going to make you better at sustainability overall.
I think that's a really great point, Mike. And if you are looking to try things, I would highly recommend this book, The Everlasting Meal. Mike actually just lent it to me a couple of weeks ago, and it is just a wealth of knowledge for what to use, like how you can cook with food scraps. One of the things is carrot tops. You can make pesto from it, and really kind of anything you can think of is included in this book. It is absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend it. But if you're not a book person, there's also a fantastic Instagram account at PlantU. Her name is Carly Boudreaux, I believe, but she has like 5 million followers. She's absolutely crushing it. But her entire thing is just plant-based cooking and cooking with scraps. She has an entire series called Scrappy Cooking, where she will just show you different recipes you can make from food scraps. She's really engaging. She's really great. So if you're looking for that stuff, I would highly encourage giving her a follow.
I'm sorry, I went through the bullet points and forgot totally about the book. I do love that book. One of the things I like to do when making a plan, this is just a simple example, but just so people have an idea. Like start the week with, say, a chili, and that lasts a day or two, and then what I have left over, add more stuff to, because now it has become tacos, and then from tacos, it has become, from that leftover, nachos or pasta. My personal favorite is casserole. End of the week, everything ends up as a casserole. Spaghetti casserole doesn't matter. Some sort of casserole, but I'm a carb person. And my wife left me a note to say not to tell everybody to make casseroles, that soup is an acceptable option, and that everything can become soup at the end of the week. Disclaimer, I am not a soup person. I feel like that's a beverage, not a meal. And so if you're into that, yeah, go for it by the end of the week. Me, I would casserole. I think that's
I'm right with you, Mike. If I wanted to eat water, I'd just drink the water.
So Rona has put in here that she has the electric composter, and so I guess that works for her, but she says it's sterile, so you have to mix it with compost first. But anyway, so I guess
that's good to know. Oh, I was just gonna say the same thing. Hi, Rona. I miss you too. I hope everything's been beautiful down there for you.
we both know Rona then. That's great.
Sustainability matters. Always community, always connections here. Great stuff. All righty. We only got 10 minutes left, so we got to move. So I'm going to fly through these next 2 slides. These are just a couple of my favorite recipes from that Everlasting Meal book. Save your veggie scraps to make broth. All you have to do is add water, then get it to a boil and simmer it for an hour. Potato skin chips. It's kind of self-explanatory. Just save those potato skins, get them in some oil, some seasoning, bake them or fry them up. Very, very good. Chickpea water, you can actually make mayonnaise from it. You can make marshmallows from it. And if you check out that PlantU Instagram account, she has videos on both. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. And then we have a video about how you can turn a leftover peanut butter jar that might look like this into a delicious Thai peanut sauce. Just add in the stuff that you like and make a sauce. And that's kind of true for everything. Whether you have like ketchup that's almost out, or barbecue sauce or ranch or anything like that, just add more ingredients to it, and then you have a new salad dressing or a new sauce. Never let those things go to waste. And mixing ingredients is just delicious. It's like that casserole vibe that Mike was going for. You know, you don't have to follow the rules with all these things. You're allowed to make stuff yourself. So combine those scraps, make something good, and experiment. Find what works for you. I'm not going to talk about this at all, really, but I just love citrus peels. There's a lot of way to reuse them. You can candy the peels with some sugar. You can turn them into cleaning spray if you use some vinegar. If you soak them in alcohol for a couple months, you can make like a nice orange extract. Fantastic for Tito's, fantastic. And you can also use the zest to mix it with some salt, and that's a great seasoning that you can put on stuff if you're grilling. Absolutely fantastic. And for your garden, you can also use these food scraps for that. If you're not someone who does a lot of cooking and aren't super motivated to be making like a carrot top pesto, just toss those in your compost and do something like that. But you can also use things like banana peels, eggshells, and coffee grounds to fertilize your plants. I live in an apartment and don't have a garden, but I have had a lot of success with the coffee grounds and the eggshells in my houseplants. And then Nan and Mike, I believe you've both used these in your gardens too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I use the coffee grounds primarily for my worms in the wintertime. It really hypes them up and makes them eat faster instead of going dormant.
The worms are just like us. They need that caffeine boost, especially in the winter. Alrighty, but yeah, really just experiment with these things. Or I guess not experiment with this, but with food scraps in general. Experiment with them and just try not to let stuff go to waste. Again, just always think about the back of these carrots probably cost me 50 cents. And if 50 cents doesn't matter to you that much, then multiply it in your head and try and trick yourself. I don't really know what to tell you, but just try and maximize the food that you buy to save yourself some money and just to avoid them going into the landfill and becoming part of that 22% of solid waste in there. And then Mike already kind of touched on this, but with a ton of the vegetables you get, you can regrow these. So if you toss a lot of them in water and you stick them on a windowsill, they will just immediately start to sprout up. If you do green onions, especially, these will grow really, really fast, and you can make just one like bunch of green onions that you buy last a really long time if you're doing this. Another repurpose. I put so many slides in here. All right. For food packaging, we'll talk about that too. For plastic tubs and clamshells, those are great to use as planters. Just make sure they have drainage holes on the bottom so all of that excess water is able to flow through. That picture on the screen right there is my pride and joy and absolute sunshine in the world, my cat Kawhi. Just enjoying some cat grass that I grew in an old strawberry container. They work absolutely perfectly and would highly recommend using them. It kind of sucks that a lot of the times we can't even buy like blueberries or strawberries without those clamshell packaging in the winter. But if you do like berries and you want to find a way to reuse them, plants 100% of the time. Glass jars, obviously a great leftover for cups, meal prep, really anything, overnight oats. Glass jars are kind of an infinite wealth of use. And then you can also like upcycle different crafts and jewelry from stuff. Number 6 plastics, which are oftentimes used in those clamshells, can actually be used as shrinky dinks. If you ever did those as a kid, you just cut them into whatever shape you want, write on them with the marker, bake them for a few minutes, and then they will shrink. I'll be honest, it does not work as well as buying the actual shrinky dink product, but if you have kids and you're looking for a way to reuse it, introduce them to the whole idea of repurposing and reimagining things, that's a really great craft that I would definitely encourage you to give a try. Alrighty, and then on to our last topic of the night is recycle/compost. What do we do with all that stuff that we can't either refuse to buy, reduce to buying, or reuse? So thankfully, we kind of have a resident expert in solid waste right here in Mike Nee. So he's going to talk a little bit about what to compost, what to recycle, and then what should just end up being landfilled, unfortunately.
So first thing, yeah, check your local guidelines. The Material Reclamation Facility, MRF, that dictates a lot of the materials that we can recycle, because recycling is a commodity-driven market. I won't go a long way down that road because that's normally 1 hour on its own. But check and see what can be recycled first. In most places, most plastics cannot be recycled. There's a great advertising and marketing push right now, especially by bottling companies, to really push the magic of plastic recycling, but that's just it. It's magic in marketing. It is not real on the ground just yet. Separate materials, yep. A lot of the times you need to do that because they go to different places. They get recycled differently. And cleaning the containers, it sounds, like common sense because you want to recycle the container and not the food, but yes, they need to be kept free from other contaminants. If they're contaminated, rinse it, wash it. They don't have to be sanitary. So If you're washing your dishes in the sink, use that dirty dishwasher or dirty dish water to wash your container out, or use your rain barrel water. You don't have to use clean water to get it and eat out of this container again. You just need the food stuff off of it. And then, of course, reusing it beyond recycling. Nan mentioned in the garden that she likes to use the cardboard to keep weeds down. Some of it she adds into compost. I use it for bedding material for the worms, as well as for compost and weed suppression. And another thing I really cannot push enough is have a blender for your garden, just an outdoor blender. The banana peels, the eggshells, the cardboard, all the bigger things that are going to take some time to break down. That's what the blender's for. Just and make it quick and easy on yourself.
Okay. And what we mean by separate materials on this is not necessarily being like my glasses go in this, my plastics go in this, my cardboard goes in this, but like that picture right there of the Bonza pasta, that is a cardboard box with plastic film that lets you see the pasta. So cardboard and plastic are separated when recycling. That plastic film most likely can't be recycled where you live. So just make sure to remove that before you stick the cardboard box into your recycling bin.
Good point. And it also brings up one of my pet peeves, which is the milk alternatives that come in that plastic carton that looks like a paper carton, because it is paper pulp that's been infused with plastic and now cannot be recycled by either company anywhere, whether as plastic or as paper. They ruined both products.
And again, talking about trade-offs, it's very hard to find non-dairy milks that aren't packaged in those things. So that's, again, just something, what do you prioritize? And that's a question that you can answer kind of for yourself.
Everything. Anything that biodegrades, you should compost. But you're going to get with intolerance. All right. So there's going to be some invertebrate life in there that help your compost work, whether that's the bacteria, the nematodes, the worms, beetles, that sort of thing. Now, if you start getting mice, rats, your neighbor's dogs, you probably don't want to add the materials that are drawing them in. Unless you don't like your neighbor's dog, then do it. Go ahead and put the meat cuttings out there, the fat that you didn't eat off of the steak, put it in there, let the dog get sick, not your problem. Or let him just roll around in it and take it home. That'll teach him to stay in his yard too. Also, don't listen to me. Don't do this. Be a good neighbor.
Sorry. Quick composting question. The attendee says they compost as much as possible, but sometimes put scraps down the drain. If there's any chance water facilities are composting or using anaerobic digestion for solids?
Only to clean the water, not to use it as a resource, not as a fertilizer, a compost, an additive. That's like putting your coffee grounds or your prescription medication down there. There's treatments to help reduce the impact of it, but it's not being used for something else. I hadn't thought about doing that. Yeah, I wouldn't put it down the drain. That should primarily be for water. Put it in your composter. If you want to put it in water, you can ferment it outside, and you can make an excellent, excellent, excellent fertilizer. However, we do not have enough time to go into it. There are some risks with fermenting in gases outdoors, so you really want to know what you're doing with that, and that you're not making a bomb or the appearance of one that your neighbors would not enjoy.
Again, no liability for sustainability matters with this webinar. Ferment at your own risk. All righty, we'll move on to the last slide. Just talk about what should be landfilled, and essentially it's everything else.
Yeah. It's so we started with planning ahead. One of the steps with your planning is at your trash can. What's going in your trash can? That's where you need to start your plan. What am I putting in there? What do I need to do to not put this in there? You're going to have a landfill. That's humanity. You're going to have some trash and waste. It may not be the same thing every day, every week, but consider it before it goes in so that you can come up with a plan so that it doesn't go into your trash can. Or come to the acceptance of, I don't have the time, money, resources to come up with an alternative. It's okay that this is where this goes.
And a great like approach you can take to that mindset too is to do a trash audit of yourself. If you're someone who has never really paid attention to what you buy, put on some gloves or just raw dog it if you're kind of nasty and just dig through your kitchen scraps and see what kind of trash is there. You'll notice the things that you buy a lot. You'll notice the things that like, oh wow, I've bought strawberries 3 times in the past 3 weeks and I never eat all of them. Actually paying attention to the stuff that you're throwing away will really help inform the stuff that you should be buying, the stuff that you should be composting, and really just give you a better idea of the impact that you're having. It's a humbling experience for a lot of us, I think. I think Mike's trash would look absolutely pristine compared to a lot of ours.
I see
Alrighty.
a question that came up in the chat, if I could address it. Couldn't hear
Yeah.
what I was talking about with the carton. Not the waxy cartons. It's designed to look like the waxy cartons. The way you can tell the difference is a waxy carton, you have to unfold the lip to pour out. The ones I'm talking about with the infusion have a screw-on lid. So it looks like a waxy carton, but it has a screw lid on it. That's the ones that are infused with plastic instead of wax.
So that's like all the oat milk, all the soy milk, all the coconut milk, like all those ones that are like the Silk brand or anything. Those are all just non-recyclable.
Yep, but now they make the bigger jug ones that are recyclable 1s and 2s, at least in this area. Check your own.
We do have one last question in the Q&A. Are non-coated paper takeaway containers recyclable? Some are noted as compostable, but I wonder if they're also recyclable for those without active composting.
We would need another hour for Mike to rant about the composting certification that products go through. That means that they're compostable in laboratory settings, not in the real world. If it's going in the trash, it is going to the landfill or incineration. It is not going to composting. So it doesn't matter if it has that composting label if you're just trashing it. I'm sorry, I went off on a rant and I already lost what I was talking about with it. Oh, is it the ones like for takeaway food containers? Sometimes. There's different ones that check your local place for it. It depends if the paper is ultimately ending up at a paper mill or a different type of facility, whether or not it can be recycled.
Mike, we have a request to, somebody wants to sign up for your rants. So I think this is a new program through Sustainability Matters.
Oh, I definitely could.
Pay attention to the emails. We might set something up. I could see just a Mike rant hour session. I'd love to hear it. I'd be there.
Easiest way is meet me down on the walking mall, one of the adult beverage locations.
Alrighty, well, it is 8:03 and we want to be respectful of your guys' time, so we are going to go ahead and wrap it up. Once again, really thank you guys for joining us this evening, and please help me thank Nan and Mike in the chat by saying thank you. I am going to drop a little exit poll. If you guys wouldn't mind filling that out before you log off, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Just super short, 4 questions. It would just be very helpful for us. And if you did enjoy tonight's event, please consider getting registered for our Scraps to Soil webinar, a guide to home composting. We don't have a date set for that yet, but it's going to be sometime in late March. So please just pay attention to the emails that you get from us, or just pay attention to our social media. We will be announcing all of that stuff there as soon as we have that ready to go. And if you enjoyed tonight, please also consider making a donation to Sustainability Matters. We are a small but mighty grassroots nonprofit, and really all of your support, whether that be just showing up today or financially, really means the world to us and does make a difference. So we really just greatly appreciate you guys being here and, becoming part of the Sustainability Matters family. As Lauren mentioned at the beginning, we are going to be sending out a recording of this webinar and a link to a ton of the resources that we mentioned and a lot of others in an email that's going to be going out around noon tomorrow. So just be on the lookout for that. Send that to your friends and family if you enjoyed this webinar. And really just thank you guys for being here. I hope you had a fantastic time. I had a great time presenting. I don't know if I should say this, but I had more fun doing this than any webinar I've done before. I think it's because I cook so much and there's just so much to learn and so much room for improvement with cooking and food scraps. So be creative about it. Try out these things. If you do, please email us, comment on social media, let us know how it goes. And we hope to see you guys at future Sustainability Matters events. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll so I get to actually save the results because I didn't do that last time and log us off for the evening. So Thank you guys so much for being with us, and I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar. So be well and have a good night.
Oh,
Great job.
I guess Kenny's gone.
Man,
I don't know who has the master to end this, but I'm gonna end too. Hopefully,
Okay.
maybe if we all end then. But thanks everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, guys. Okay. Good night.
I'm gonna stay here and just stare creepily.
I could talk recycling with you all night, Mike. So don't
Yeah.
tempt me.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.